Hello, it's Sarah here. As you can see, this video is part of our final lessons on secularization theory. And here we're going to cover existential security theory, cultural transition and cultural defense, and religious market theory. And for us in year 13, that will be the final theories that we'll take on board when we're putting our secularization arguments for and against together. Okay, so we're starting off with another argument against secularization. Just to throw this one in before we look at the existential security theory, Roof and McKinney argue that there's actually been a growth of conservative Protestant groups. So we know of those from our previous studies as the New Christian Right. These groups in the USA have actually started to grow, and they've been emerging more and more and being kind of more high profile and having more of a voice in recent years. This is an argument that secularization is not occurring because they're very conservative traditional views, which we've looked at previously under regressive social change. They are very traditional views based on Christian scripture and traditional Christian beliefs, and this starts to link with what we've learned about fundamentalism as well. So you might use this in an essay on secularization as a flip side to an argument for secularization, or you might have a whole paragraph on its own, or you might link it in with fundamentalism. Okay, so another argument against secularization is Norris and Inglehart's existential security theory. And this is one of the arguments that says, actually, we're not secularizing as a planet because the secularization arguments generally just apply to the Western world. And what Norris and Inglehart are saying is that the demand for religion actually is far more prominent in less economically developed and more deprived countries. So what we would call developing countries, maybe. So they're saying demand for religion is actually, when you look at it from a global perspective, it's greater from these low-income groups because there are societies that feel less secure, existentially less secure. So they've got these kind of existential threats. It might be famine, it might be earthquakes, it might be disease, it might be environmental disasters. So this really explains why what we might call third world or developing countries, why they maybe remain more religious than the Western world, which has far more security when we think of it from this perspective. So we think of the Western world as more prosperous, and we're thinking of the developing world as having these kind of existential threats. And therefore they're using religion, and what Norris and Inglehart are arguing is it's a psychological function that religion is playing because it's offering the security and the kind of explanation for things that can't otherwise be explained. And that explains why Western countries have become more secular, but other parts of the world haven't. And then furthermore, Gill and Lundegaard are actually, they back this up by saying when they did a study, they found that the more the country spends on welfare, the lower the needs are of religion. So we can argue that when the country starts to put welfare into place, there's less existential threat. Therefore, religion dies away because there isn't a need for it. Now, this sounds like quite a logical argument, doesn't it? But it is criticised. It is absolutely criticised because Vasquez, being one of the critics, argues that Norris and Inglehart are actually, it's all quantitative. They're literally saying these people have not got money, these people have, therefore religion is all about that. And I think we know from what we've studied already that things like relative deprivation and the spiritual void doesn't only appear in people who don't have money and don't have material security. So they don't actually examine people's definitions of existential security. So there are plenty of people who have an existential crisis who aren't living in threat of famine and earthquake. So it's a very simplistic argument, is the criticism that Vasquez is making of Norris and Inglehart's take on it. And furthermore, another criticism of Norris and Inglehart's existential security theory is that it ignores the positive reasons. It only looks at people having religion as a response to negative things and having it as a kind of opiate in some ways, if we were to look at it from a Marxist perspective. They ignore the positive reasons. Some people are very wealthy. They choose to engage in religion. They find it offers them lots of positivity, community, explanations. It fills a spiritual void. There's lots there. And Norris and Inglehart appear to ignore that really in their existential security theory.